Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all to our 35th webinar. I would like to start by wishing you and your families good health and safety in these difficult times. As we start this meeting, I thought while nature is reawakening, humanity is facing one of its darkest periods in living memory. COVID-19 is causing tragic loss of life, and the measures needed to fight it have turned our world upside down, affecting billions of people and stopping economies in the tracks. This is a crisis like no other. The scars left by the first wave of COVID-19 pandemic have hardly healed, and India is already facing a nastier second round of infections. The resurgence of COVID-19 cases has not only posed a fresh challenge to the healthcare system, but also the battered economy that has hardly recovered after exiting a recessionary phase a few months ago. The economic situation could worsen in the wake of renewed restrictions to contain the rapid surge in COVID-19 cases. Consumer confidence is a key aspect of economic recovery, and any lag could directly affect how individuals spend. Lower spending could directly impact the demand curve and ultimately affect business operations and economic recovery. With COVID-19 restrictions expanded and lockdown measures reintroduced in many states, Indian manufacturers look set to experience a challenging month in May 21. AABN has been organizing webinars successfully for the past 10 months to brainstorm practical ideas for new growth, and the companies in the network immediately set to work developing new plans. Looking ahead, AABN will develop a strategic plan to focus on business networking amongst its members. With over 70% of its members being entrepreneurs, it hopes to better serve by fostering a dynamic and mutually beneficial networking system. By strengthening connectivity, it can help evolve a credible, independent, and collaborative voice for the entrepreneurial community. The idea is to take the business networking group beyond the frontiers of nostalgia, draw from its diverse resources, and nurture a vibrant global networking community of learners and trailblazers. An entrepreneurial ecosystem can make all its members stronger and more resilient. Each approach to dispute resolution has its own unique characteristics, including the role and responsibilities of the involved parties. Successful negotiation is much like playing a game. The knot in your stomach as you prepare to negotiate a deal tells you how vital this discussion will be, and winning in business usually demands specific results. A winning negotiation, however, signifies that both parties have not only achieved their goals, but build a stronger and extended business relationship. If conflict is inevitable, then learning to negotiate your way through it is essential. It is imperative that you become more self-aware of your behavioral biases in your conflict handling behavior and how you can optimize your negotiation skills. Every negotiator has a set of core principles that are part of the negotiation DNA. These principles are often shaped by the negotiator's battle experience and cultural upbringing and act as fundamental building blocks of the negotiating style. Choosing the right combination will have a substantial impact on a negotiator's success and failure in what they achieve in their career. Do you get nervous or feel unprepared when it comes to negotiating? Not being effective at negotiation means your products are undervalued and your prices are driven down. We have with us today, as small business owners, effective negotiation begin by understanding who you are negotiating with, what problem is being resolved, and is this a want or a need. The final step in any negotiation process is to agree on a fair exchange of value. We have with us today Mr. Anuj Jaganathan, who will elaborate on the principles and psychology of persuasion and tips to help us refine our personal negotiating style and improve our success rates in tricky situations, including getting the best out of difficult conversations. Let me extend a very warm welcome to our eminent guest speaker, Mr. Anuj Jaganathan, to this interactive business networking session. It would take a good part of today if I have to run you through all the achievements of this illustrious trainer and coach, who is the CEO of Propellers Consulting, which prides itself on value creation. This trainer and coach believes in making positive impacts. At a juncture we find ourselves in today, thanks to the pandemic, there can be no one more fitting than Mr. Anuj Jaganathan to address, enlighten, and take questions from this diverse group on negotiating with an impact. Anuj Jaganathan is a senior finance professional with over 20 years of diverse experience of working in renowned companies and multinational organizations such as Google, Visa, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and others, and has a rich experience of dealing with executives, staffs, suppliers, and customers. He has also developed great perspectives, having worked in multiple locations such as the Silicon Valley in California, Singapore, London, and India. He got his MBA from University of California, Los Angeles. He's a certified speaker, trainer, and coach from the John Maxwell team. His keen interest in negotiation and a passion for teaching and writing has led him to host webinars and workshops on negotiations across the world and to write books, blogs, and articles. He is the author of the Amazon bestseller Negotiation Quotient, Opening the Door to a Successful Deal, and We Can Negotiate Too, a book for young adults on negotiation. He also hosts webinars, trainings on negotiation for kids and adults, young adults. I have a compulsion for completion, an innate, insatiable need for closure because we are uncomfortable with uncertainty. I hope you'll all make the best use of this webinar. Hope you have a very engaging and enriching day. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cut short this title track and credits and welcome Mr. Anuj Jaganathan to take over from here. Thank you. Over to you, Anuj.
Okay, great. That was a great introduction, and I'm glad to be amongst all of you, esteemed professionals and entrepreneurs. And I'm looking forward to this session as much as you probably are in understanding my perspectives. But I'm here to help you and maybe even learn from you if there are situations where I can learn from you in a practical situation. Now, first of all, thank you, Mr. Gopi and Jagan sir, for this invite. Again, like I said, it is a pleasure and honor for me to be here and share my perspectives with you. Now, let's think about negotiation as a topic. In an MBA course, negotiation class is a 4.5-day class, and that also basically barely scrapes the surface in terms of negotiation skills and techniques and concepts and strategies that you have to implement while you're negotiating. So to be able to share with you in a 30-minute session, I'm going to keep this at a very high level. Barely it'll be a tip of the iceberg and barely scratch the surface. But then what is the most important for entrepreneurs and senior leaders like you is maybe to have an interactive session and address some of your questions. And of course, I'm here to help you even after the session. If you have questions, you want to reach out to me, I'll share my contacts, and you can always reach out to me. I think in terms of the admin or logistics, we will probably have questions at the end. You can type in your questions in chat and maybe we'll track that and also come back at the end and take live questions and or questions on the chat. So moving on, I think the introduction was great, and Mr. Gopi, you went through everything that is on this slide, but I want to share a personal story. So if you go back about 8 years, I was probably a very average, and maybe to the extent of saying I was a pathetic negotiator. I'm claiming that because there have been situations in my life where negotiation didn't come naturally to me. And why was that is because we all don't learn negotiation early in our life. Now that situation where I had a huge chance to negotiate and gain value, I actually left a lot of value on the table. This was immediately before I was moving into a big role and a big change in my life. And that negotiation experience didn't help me because I was probably put back a little bit in terms of my negotiation and my career because I didn't negotiate adequately. Now, how did this come across is when I joined my MBA program a few months after that experience, I went through this whole session on negotiation and I learned what a big mistake I had actually made while negotiating my move and my life event. So this is where I actually got a whole lot of interest in the topic of negotiation. And it stayed at the back of my mind throughout my MBA program with a huge interest and awakening that I want to actually go and learn all the nitty-gritties and all the strategies and all the tips that I can get in negotiation after my MBA program. And that is exactly what I did. I came back from my MBA program. I started learning. I started reading, watching videos. I joined a program on negotiation on Harvard. It is actually a free resource. If all of you want to join, you can just type program on negotiation at Harvard. and you get a lot of material. And then I also went to Harvard for a negotiation conference where I got certified. So all this happened because of my keen interest in negotiation. And eventually, it's been 5.5 years now. Along the journey, I wrote a couple of books like you know, and like you see here. And it has been an interesting ride. And I think the key idea over here is negotiation has helped me a lot since I started going down deeper into this topic. I can now actually relate to many situations where effective negotiation helps a lot in terms of adding value to yourself and to the other party. So hopefully some of these uh, major insights that I share will help you, even though I'm not going into too much detail, but I'll at least share with you the high level insights. Now, what I want to do is, first of all, 7 insights on negotiation, right? The first is, this is a good news, that negotiation skills are completely malleable. Now, what does that mean is I shared with you my story from almost zero, as I claim to be. I actually think that I have gained a lot of information and value, or information and knowledge in negotiation. And that is because negotiation skills can easily be learned. Uh, it's a big topic of debate whether people are born negotiators or made negotiators. I believe that you are only born with a certain style and a dominant style, but you have to be able to use your style in many situations, and you have to learn the skills, negotiation skills, in order to get better. So, but the good news is you can get there, you can develop all these skills. The second is creativity is the key to effective solutions. And as you all probably already know, when you are negotiating, it is highly important that you create solutions, not only for yourself, but for the other party. And that's where your creativity comes in. Let me give you an example. There was a vendor and the client wanted delivery of some items by, let's say, the 15th of the month. And the vendor has to go all the way to 14th to build this product. And now they are stuck with a situation where they cannot ship the product within a day, right? Now, how do you creatively come up with a solution for that kind of situation? Is you go and discuss with the vendor, with the client, that if you need this product to be delivered on the 15th, what are you going to do after that, right? Understand the interest. If they're going to ship that further to another department which has to make use of that product, what you can do, and this is actually a live case where the vendor then discussed with the client that if you let us stamp or tag whatever you need to do on that product and send it directly to that other department, we can do that. And we will do that on the 14th, and it will still reach the other department by 17th, which will save you a day. So creativity comes with thinking further, but the thinking has to come with open and honest conversation with the client. Negotiation is not a war, right? Negotiation, again, like I just mentioned, it has to be open and honest communication, conversation, discussion, and it has a component of coming together, collaborating. So it cannot be considered a war. I have actually had situations where people have mentioned negotiating is proving your point, or winning something in the deal, but it is not to that extent. I think you have to partner and collaborate with the other party. Price is almost never the criteria, and this is because there are so many other things involved in a negotiation that when you negotiate, you have to come up with solutions that work for both the parties, and the price is only one small component of that entire solution. The next is walkaway is also a solution. So many of us would probably think, okay, we are going into a negotiation, and we also get a little bit nervous about it because we want to get some kind of a deal. But in many cases, and this also depends on case to case basis, but in many cases, walkaway might be your solution. So if you have to be decisive, and at that point, if you decide that it is a walkaway, then that actually can be a solution and a criteria where you walk away. Negotiation is being human. Again, like I mentioned, collaboration is important, but also empathy and understanding the other person and working with them as a human to human. These are all important aspects of negotiation, which many people actually overlook. And then negotiation is not black, sorry for the typo, but negotiation is not black and white. It is, of course, a gray area. You can't walk away with a checklist and say, okay, today I have learned everything in negotiation and I can apply it to every situation. Negotiation skills are such that you have to apply them and customize them based on the situation you're in. So these are the 7 insights I wanted to share with you on negotiation. Now, moving forward, what is negotiation? So before that, I'll ask you a question. How many of you actually have taken a negotiation class or studied negotiation before? Maybe you can type yes or no on the chat. And I'll just get an idea of whether you have gone through a full course on negotiation. Okay, so I'm getting some yeses and also a few no's. So when I ask this question in many of my other classes and workshops, I actually get a no at about maybe 90% cases. So people generally have not experienced a full course on negotiation or learned negotiation, and that might trigger them to be a little bit nervous or maybe have the butterflies in the stomach as to, okay, how am I going to deal with the negotiation? But let me share with you my definition on negotiation, and maybe that will help clarify a little bit more on what negotiation is. So negotiation is an interactive exchange between 2 or more parties. So of course, there are 2 or more parties who come together to have that exchange. The other point that is extremely important is to achieve desired outcomes, not only for yourself, but for everybody. So we go into a negotiation with our own desired outcomes, and we want to achieve those. But what we also need to keep in mind is that the other party is also in that negotiation for some desired outcomes. How do we understand what their desired outcomes are? And how do we partner and collaborate so that both parties or all the parties walk away feeling good about that negotiation? That is what is key in a negotiation. And how many of us do that is actually a big question, because I have heard this from so many people that I have walked into a negotiation thinking, I want this and how do I get this? And that might not be the final outcome, because the other party also comes with their own interests. So moving forward, how do I explain what negotiation is? So I say in whatever in my book and what I teach is there is a balance of negotiation. And what is the balance of? It is the balance of the science of negotiation and the art of negotiation. The balance has to be, or the blend has to be appropriate and proper for you to succeed in the negotiation. So you have to strike the right balance. Now, the science basically is a 3-step process, which is the prepare, engage, and then close. And we'll go through some of that in the next few slides. And the art is basically some behaviors and techniques, and we will look at those. So the whole process, which is the science, has to be complemented adequately with the art, which is the behaviors and techniques, to make it a successful negotiation. Now, moving forward, let's look at the science, which is the process first. So preparation is one of the most important steps in the science of negotiation, in the process of negotiation. And as you all probably have dealt with in the past as entrepreneurs, when you're going into a deal, you have to spend immense amount of time preparing for the negotiation. Because if your preparation is not strong, your negotiation, your engagement with the other party is not going to be strong, and your final result is not going to be strong. So that's why the preparation is of extremely high value or high importance when you're negotiating. Now, what is preparation? So I explain preparation as a few points, which I will mention here first. So there is a CAV framework. For all of you entrepreneurs out there, this CAV framework might be interesting. Of course, it's a long framework, so I don't have time to go into too much detail, but I'll explain it to you at high level. So CAV framework is competency, ability, and value. When you go to showcase your product or showcase your services to a client, CAV framework might come very handy. And why is that? Is because when you're taking the CAV framework to the other to a client or to the other party, you're showcasing not only what you bring to the table, but also how it benefits the other party. I think this is basic information, but then I have put it together as the CAV framework just in case it helps people to break it down that way. So let's look at it. Competency is basically what you bring to the table. Basically, what are you good at? What is your expertise? What are you bringing? What is your product or service? That's your competency. In the competency, you also highlight the product or service that you're bringing. How does that benefit the other party? So that's where you bring in the aspect of how is it going to benefit the other party. So that's competency. Ability is basically a unique feature that you have in your product or in your delivery, something that makes you distinct in the way you deliver your service or in the way the product helps the other party. So something unique, a special characteristic. So that's the ability. So you might have a great product, but if you don't have a unique ability, that product might be something that even other companies have. So you need to have a good competency, but at the same time have a unique ability to deliver it or something special in that product or service. So that's competency and ability. And the final is value. So you might have great competency, you might have some unique abilities, and even another competitor might have the same. But what are the additional values, or what is the additional value that you can bring to the client? And this value can be in terms of maybe delivery of something in addition to the product. Maybe you deliver a training service for free, or give them discounts, or give them a yearly subscription, or any of those kind of aspects that might bring additional value to the client. So you have a great competency, you have a great ability, and then you add extra in terms of value to the client. And overall, that CAV framework makes it irresistible proposition or proposal for the client. So that is how the CAV framework helps any person, any businessman, any entrepreneur, any salesperson to showcase or bring their product in front of the client. Why is that important for negotiation? Is because when you go to a negotiation, you have to do the same. In your negotiation, you explain what is good with your product or service, and you can use the CAV framework for that. Now, the next important point is the interests. Interests are extremely important because, like I mentioned earlier, when you walk into a negotiation, you don't only think about yourself, you think about the other party. So when you go into a negotiation with your own interest, that is in a way called position. The other party also has that position. Let me give you an example. Mother and daughter are negotiating for the daughter to go to swimming class, right? The mother has her position, which is to say that no, the swimming class is good for you. You have to go for the class. And the daughter has her position saying, no, I don't want to go to the swimming class. I don't like it. Those are the positions. I don't like it is a reason, but is it enough reason for the mother? Or the swimming class is good for you, but how is it good for you? Is that enough information for the daughter to understand? So the positions, of course, are the basic starting point for the mother and daughter. But what they have to do is go beyond the positions into the actual interest. So mother can actually go and ask the daughter, okay, you don't like it, but why don't you like it? And when you go down deeper to understand the interest, the daughter might say the water is cold, or I don't like swimming with many people. or I don't like deep waters, and whatever that is, right? Those are the different interests that the daughter has that that make up her position. Similarly, the mother also might have her own interest, which is swimming is good for you because it helps you learn a very essential life skill, or it is fun when you go and swim with your friends, or when we go out on a holiday and things like that. So those are all the different interests that the mother has. So now if they sit and explain the interest and then come up with solutions where, let's say the daughter doesn't like deep waters, maybe she can start swimming in a maybe more shallow pool first and then go into deeper waters. Or if the water is too cold, maybe she can find an indoor pool which is heated up. Oh, those are all the different solutions then that you come up with when you understand all the interests. Now, in addition to interest, it is also important to understand alternatives. When I say alternatives, it means that when you go into a negotiation and you have a certain interest that you need to get in the negotiation, or a certain outcome that you're looking for, what happens if you don't get those outcomes? What happens if you don't reach a deal, right? In that case, you need to have alternatives. If you have sufficiently strong alternatives, then you walk into the negotiation feeling a lot more confident and comfortable, meaning that if the deal doesn't go through, I have XYZ or XYZ as my options or alternatives. And you can choose the top alternative, which I also call as the train, the top ranked alternative in your negotiation. You can choose the train and then say, okay, if the deal doesn't go to, at least I have a strong alternative and I can rely on the alternative. On the flip side, if you don't have stronger alternatives and if you're heavily dependent on that deal, what happens is you are a little bit more desperate, or maybe you don't walk into the deal that confident because you are looking to make some deal and get some outcome of it. So having strong alternatives always is good. I think what a lot of us don't do is define what these alternatives are, come up with the alternatives, identify a strong alternative. These are the things that many people don't do while they are preparing for a negotiation. And then, of course, the last point here is the types of negotiation. There are several different types of negotiation, and strategies differ based on the type of negotiation. For example, if it's a single party or I mean a dual, like a two-party negotiation, then of course your strategies have to differ than if it's a multi-party, like multiple parties. Or when it is a coalition, your strategies are different from a two-party negotiation. So there are all these different types of negotiations, such as the two-party, multiple party, intra-group, intergroup, a coalition, a mediation. All these are different types of negotiation where strategies will differ. So that's about preparation. Now, Benjamin Franklin said, failing to prepare is preparing for failure. I think you all might, or some of you might have heard this before, is if you don't prepare enough, I highlighted this even before, you're basically not preparing not to be successful, or preparing for failure. The next part of the science is the actual engagement. The actual engagement is where you put into effect or you execute whatever you have planned for. So all the preparation now comes into actual execution in the engage phase. Now, in the engage phase, what you do is interact with the other party. So the interaction comes in where you have to deal with situations, you have to deal with the person, you have to have proper behaviors. All those things come in during the interaction session. There are also a couple of strategies or points I want to highlight about the engagement. First is framing. Now, framing means that when you are engaging or talking to the other party, you have to frame the situation or the negotiation as a positive or as a gain for the other party. Now, how do you show that as a gain, and why do you show that as a gain? First of all, why is because research has showed that when you show something as a gain to the other party, they're going to be less risk averse, or they're going to be more accepting. Whereas if you show it as a loss or as something that is negative for them, they are going to be willing to take risk, and maybe they're not going to partner with you. So it is always helpful to show something as a positive to the other party. Positive could mean something that benefits them or something that helps them avoid a negative situation. So those are the ways to frame something. And anchoring is another very important aspect of the engagement phases. What happens is in anchor is you go and deliver your anchor while you're engaging. So let's say in your preparation phase, you came up with some anchors. You said, okay, I will start with this price, or I will start with this timeline, or a due date, or whatever that anchor is. You start with that. But then the other party also has their own anchors. When you both put your anchors there, then you negotiate based on the anchors. It is extremely important to come up with anchors during the prepare phase and then deliver those anchors successfully during the engage phase. And again, there is a lot of information on anchoring that I can share, but time constraints don't allow me. But things like your anchors have to be based on strong justifiable criteria. And why is that? Because when you put an anchor, I'm sure some of you have experienced this, when you go and in a deal and somebody says, okay, my anchor, my first price is, let's say 2 lakh, and your price is only 10,000 or 20,000. Now you see that big difference. What happens most likely is when you come up with an anchor like that and it's not justifiable. If it's justifiable, it might still hold true, but if it's not justifiable, you lose trust with the other party. So anchors always have to be justified. And the other party might actually come and ask you straight away, how is this anchor justified? Okay, effective engagement makes or breaks the negotiation. So all your preparation might not be successful or valid if you don't effectively engage with the other party, taking care of all the other aspects. And then finally, close. That's the last part of the process of negotiation. In the close, what you do is you come to an agreement. So mutual terms and conditions, you get necessary approvals for that agreement. Then you put everything down either on an email or a contract or something. So you record it. And then final handshake is where you do all the necessary communications, sign the contract, or send the email, maybe also inform all the other stakeholders that need to be informed. So that's the final handshake. So agreement, record, and then handshake. That's the part of the close process. And again, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. I heard this from the negotiation class in Harvard, from the professor, Professor Subramanian out there. And what he mentioned was, until everything is agreed, so either it is signed or a valid email, appropriate email has been sent to all the stakeholders, until that has been done, nothing is agreed. So you have to have the final close, a strong close, in order to make your negotiation successful. All your efforts in the prepare and engage phase come to a successful close or closure in this phase. Now let's move forward to behaviors. I think we're running short of time. So quickly go through the behaviors. Behaviors are extremely important in negotiations. First of all, I don't know how many of us actually focus on negotiation behaviors. So maybe in the chat, I'll ask you a question. How many of you, when you go into a negotiation, you actually think about what your behavior should be like, or how would you behave in that negotiation? Maybe some yes or no answers. Do you actually focus on what behaviors or how should you approach the situation in terms of behaviors? Okay, I'm getting some yeses, some nos, and I will share with you what behaviors basically means. And I think most of you do, but if we don't, it is extremely important. Now, there are some concepts in behaviors that we might not be focusing on, and that's what I want to explain. So, of course, earning respect, trust and credibility and earning respect is very important. So you have to do everything possible. So you have to balance their needs with ours, be flexible, develop that relationship, do all that to develop the trust and credibility with the other party. So very important. I'm sure we all do that. communication, again, extremely important. Right from the time when you start engaging with the party, a communication might be an email that you send to them, or when you get together to negotiate, you have to lay down the proper rules of the negotiation and how you would successfully negotiate. And then all the way from there, while you engage and then close, your negotiation has to be, your communication has to be extremely solid in order to help your negotiation be successful. Ask, I think some of these things you all know, but again, highlighting that communication is important. And then emotions and body language. So focusing on body language, demonstrating the confidence. If you don't appear to be confident, your battle is half lost over there. Be considerate to their feelings, that is important. Show empathy, and then avoid hostility. I think these are all emotions and body language and behaviors that we generally need to focus on while we go into a negotiation. Even if the other party is hostile, there are ways to negate that. And if it gets to a situation where it becomes very difficult, then you either take time out or walk away, but do not counter hostility with hostility. I think that is very important. Now, in addition to that, the other part of behaviors is a couple of critical considerations. One is culture. So this might be based on what you answered earlier in terms of yeses or nos if you're focusing on behaviors. Now think whether these two considerations are something you take care of. So culture, what is the other party's culture? It could mean country culture if you're dealing with somebody from another country, or it could also mean a society culture. Like if you deal with somebody from the north of India, they have a different culture than south of India. So there is a society culture. There's also an organizational culture. So you have to focus on the culture of the other party. And then styles. So there are styles that we all are born with, inherent dominating styles. But then there are styles that we can also adopt in a negotiation. So there is this whole concept of what styles do the other parties demonstrate, and what is our style, and how do we strategize the negotiation based on the styles. So now think of it from that side if you answered yes or no earlier. Okay, common pitfalls in behaviors. Engaging in the negotiation without building the trust or earning respect. So that's a very common pitfall. Failing to understand their views, overlooking the communication essentials or body language or emotions, paying little attention to either culture or style. So these are all the different ways that we probably disengage in terms of the behavior, or not focusing that much or adhering to the behavior aspects in a negotiation. And finally, techniques. So there are a few influencing or persuading techniques, and I will mention some of those in the next slide to you. But just to lay the ground rules, first of all, we all use influencing techniques on a day-to-day basis. Every day, you probably don't realize it, or you probably don't know the name to it, but we are all using influencing techniques, and others are using influencing techniques on us also. There are influencing techniques that apply to multiple influencing techniques that apply to the same situation, or in some cases there might be only one or two influencing techniques that apply to a situation. It all depends on the scenario. Some of these influencing techniques are very subtle, so when they are applied, the mind actually takes it's a shortcut that is applied. The mind takes that in a behavioral aspect and reacts to those influencing techniques. So some of them can be really subtle. And then the extent of influencing techniques that can be used also differ by situation, of course, and then the culture. So in some cultures, you cannot use some of these influencing techniques because the effect of the techniques will not be strong. But in other cultures, you can use it. Again, I'll highlight one of them to you in the next slide. But remember, it's all about people. So when we talk to a party in a negotiation, we're talking to a person or a human being, and these influencing techniques generally apply to most people. Now, what are these techniques? So in terms of the world of influencing or persuasion, some of these techniques are, I've categorized them into three big buckets. One is connecting. Connecting is where you're developing relationships with the other party, right? You're developing the connection with the other party. In this case, there are three techniques. One is reciprocation, one is bonding, and the other is references. Reciprocation is where you I scratch your back, you scratch mine, that kind of situation where give and take, right? If somebody does something for you, you are compelled to do or obligated to do something back. This again might not apply in all situations or in all cultures. In some cultures, the reciprocation has a very high impact. In other cultures, it might not have an impact. So again, it is important to look at it from the situation or scenario. Bonding is important. When you develop the bonding and the trust, that's where the connecting technique, the bonding technique is most effective, and the negotiation is likely to be effective if you bond properly. And in some cultures, again, bonding is extremely important. You do the bonding in the first 2-3 meetings before you actually get down to business. And then references. So when you connect with somebody, if you have stronger references that, or maybe somebody who can help you connect with the other party, that always helps. So if you can bring somebody else as a reference. So those are the connecting techniques. Then there are committing techniques, which basically bring you into a committing mode or into a commitment. And there are two techniques there. One is promise. So if you get a promise from another party, it is more likely that they will try to comply that promise or fulfill that promise. So again, getting that promise is a technique. You can try to get a promise from them, or if you have promised somebody, you then are obligated to deliver that promise. So other people might try to get a promise from you. And then vested is where you have a decision to make, but there are 3 or 4 different parties. What you do is, outside of that decision making session or meeting, you get in touch with all the other parties, get them to agree or buy in, and then when that decision making happens, you probably have a more likely situation where the result will be in your favor because you have already talked to other parties or other stakeholders. That's the technique of getting others vested in the decision. And then the final is controlling, which is 3 more techniques that have the impact of controlling the mind. And what these techniques are, first is authority. So if you apply some authority, it is more likely to have an influence on the other party. Or similarly, they could apply an authority and you might be influenced by that. Loss anxiety. Loss anxiety means when you apply a situation where the other party might be at a loss if they don't react immediately, or you probably have had the situation where people have done that to you. That's called loss anxiety. And then vividness. Vividness is an extremely impactful way of presenting something extraordinarily. So if you go to a client and you present something, maybe a new product, in a very extraordinary manner, it is more likely for them to be influenced by that. So again, how you build vividness is very important. So these are the 3 buckets or categories of 8 influencing techniques. Again, I am not going into too much detail to explain. There are situations where they might be applied or not applied. And also in my workshops, I explain a lot more in terms of how to successfully apply these and also some examples. So what are the common faux pas that we have or errors we make in negotiation? First of all, we don't follow a structured process. So the science of negotiation that I highlighted to you. If we just walk into a negotiation and say, okay, we will just wing it, it is maybe an intuitive or trial and error negotiation, that is not going to be effective. Failing to assess our own interest and the interest of the other party. So assessing the interest of both parties is very important. Paying inadequate attention to the behaviors, failing to focus on special attributes you need during the interaction, not understanding the influencing techniques well enough will probably lead you to either get influenced too easily or not be able to influence the other party. And then not learning enough from the negotiation so that your future negotiations can be useful. Again, it's very important that every negotiation is a learning ground for you, where you when you gain a lot of experience so that you can apply it to the next negotiation. Like I said earlier, negotiation skills are malleable. You have to learn from every situation, and not only from your own situations. I have many cases where I had actually observed 2 or 3 people in a meeting negotiating or discussing. It's a negotiation, I can see it. They are discussing, and based on that, I actually learn because I know what's happening over there. So it is very important for you to get to that stage. That's it. I think I just wanted to share with you my contacts. Again, you can note these contacts and keep in touch with me. Back to Mr. Gopi.
Thanks, Anuj. It was a wonderful presentation, very crisp but very insightful. Uh, there are a lot of takeaways for our entrepreneurs today through your presentation. But as you likely said, it's a bird's eye view of what you have given, and there is much more to learn for all of us when it comes to negotiation. We'll take some questions from the chat box and also invite people to directly ask questions by unmuting themselves. The first question in the chat box.
Yeah, I can, Tariq, I noted down the questions. If you want, I can take it up.
Yes, Jagan, go ahead.
Yeah. First question is a good question from Sivaraman, specific to startups and SMEs. Basically, what is your advice for the startup to negotiate and make an entry into big corporates? Essentially, I think he's saying startups and SMEs go with a lower position. They're not able to make their position when negotiating with the big corporates. That's my understanding. Correct. So what is your advice?
Right. And I can, sure, I can answer that in a couple of ways. So first of all, whether you're a startup or a big company, you always have to be able to prove what you bring to the table for the other party, right? And as you heard the CAV framework where I mentioned, what you need to be able to do is, what is your product or service that you bring to the table? How is that going to benefit the other party? But also keep in mind what is unique. So if there are situations where your product or service is unique, which other competitors cannot match, I think those are important aspects to highlight. In any client would be happy if you're able to highlight to them what benefits they will get from your product or services, and how is your product unique, something that is going to help them from other competitors who are not able to provide that. And then, of course, the third point about the CAV framework is what extra value can you bring? So, for example, one of the partners of a consulting firm, he came to our organization. He was talking to my boss, and we were implementing a new process. Now, in that process, the contract could have been just that they will help us implement the new process and then they'll go away. That could have been the process. But the partner of the firm came back and said, in addition to helping you, of course, they had the competency to do that. Of course, they had a unique ability because they had their own process of helping the clients, their own IP based on how they help clients. But in addition to having that competency and ability, they also were able to provide meaningful value to us in the sense that the partner said, I'm going to be able to give you 3 days of free training on change management because I believe that you're also looking for some help in change management. Now, that aspect was totally not related to the main project, but the partner was focused on all the discussions he's had with not only my boss, but also the team members. And he caught the special aspect of change management. And he said, okay, I have a team that can do change management. We'll do a free session for you. You see how he connected change management to the main project, gave us some extra value. And that was actually very important to us. So that's one. And then the other aspect that you also need to focus on always is the interest of the other party. So like I said earlier, in addition to going into a negotiation with your own product and services that will benefit somebody, benefit people, but would it benefit that client specifically or not is highly dependent on the situation they are in. And you can find out that by having open and honest conversations with them, understanding what their interests are, what do they actually need, talk to them in a lot more detail to be able to understand that. And then you can customize or collaborate with them based on the solution that you need to provide to them based on what you've heard.
Does it answer, Sivaram? Yeah.
Yes, sir. It was answered to an extent.
Okay. Next question in the sequential order is from interesting question from Ankur Kumar Pandey. So what he mentions is that due to the pandemic, there is scarcity of resources and hence there is a demand pull inflation in healthcare industry, such as ambulance service or medical staff or hospital bed, etc. How to negotiate when there is a demand pull? That's what is his question.
So I would like to understand from Ankur, what side are you on? Who are you negotiating with?
With say ambulance service. With say ambulance service. There is a need for an ambulance service, but there is a heavy demand and so inflation.
Right.
Is there any technique to negotiate in this scenario?
Of course, I mean, some of the techniques that you could use is have references. I mean, a situation where it is very low demand and very high supply basically means that not everybody will get the services. Now, if you have built a lot of solid relationships outside of your work, and again, I'm highlighting this to you because your network is very important. And again, this is not something that I have come up with. You all probably understand this already. But if you have a very strong network that you have kept up with, again, your AABN is a great way for you to keep up with several different professionals and leaders in the industry or otherwise. And if you have built that network, it is more likely that you'll be able to reach in many different ways to reach a person who will be able to provide you that ambulance service. If you know, there's something called the 6 degrees of separation. So what the 6 degrees of separation says is that you can reach any person in the world. You can get connected or network with any person in the world in 6 different levels. So I know this person who knows that person who knows that person, and finally you reach a person in the world. That it is a research done that there's a 6 degree of separation. Why I'm highlighting to you that in this situation is, of course, everybody needs ambulances. You cannot talk about price because everybody might negotiate on the price or be agreeable to the price. But in this case, your network will be very important.
True. Yeah. The next question is from
Hope
Ramesh.
that answers the question, Ankur.
Ankur.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Next question, Ramesh from Monit Pro. Out of the 2 books, I think naturally 2 books authored by you, Anuj. Which one is good for startups?
Right. Okay. Let me explain a little bit about the 2 books. The first book is the one that might help professionals, startups, entrepreneurs, sales professionals, business professionals, all different people in the industry. I think that's the negotiation quotient that will help because it is very detailed in terms of everything that I explained to you in this session with a lot of examples. And of course, in the book, you don't get, in my workshop, I also share the live scenarios, do a simulation role play. We do group exercises and all that, but the book should be able to highlight to you a lot of detailed information, whatever I've shared here. The second book actually is a book for kids and young adults. And I wrote that because, like I mentioned to you earlier, in my whole life, I was probably not a great negotiator. In fact, probably even very average or even less than that. And that's because, as you all know, we don't learn negotiation early in our life. If I had learned negotiation at the age of 15 or 18 or 20, I would have probably not left as much value on the table as I think I have over the course of my career. And if you compound that that value to a long career and life, it could be quite a material and significant amount. So my goal and mission was to start teaching kids and young adults early in the life. My second book actually has done much better for some reason. I don't know what that reason is. It has done much better than the first one. And I also, like Mr. Gopi mentioned, I also teach kids and young adults negotiation. So to answer your question, I think it's the first book, The Negotiation Quotient.
Okay. Next question is from Pratap G. Are these techniques applicable for any situation, especially job interviews and salary negotiation, since the odds are in favor of the company in these scenarios?
So job interview and salary negotiation are two different aspects of job negotiation. So when I hear mostly job negotiation, I think I look at those as two different aspects, which is one is how to get hired, and the second is how to negotiate for a better salary. Of course, in this case, when you're trying to get hired, you might have both the negotiations come club, because you have to go through the job interview and prove what you bring to the table, to the company, but also at the same time, then you have to start negotiating for the salary. Whereas in other cases, you might have a salary negotiation that happens every year or once in a while, and you have to be prepared to handle a salary negotiation standalone also. Now, going back to the techniques, many of these techniques that I highlight to you, many of the strategies are very commonly applicable to most situations. For example, the CAV framework. You could easily come up with the CAV framework for yourself and highlight that to the hiring manager. I did the CAV framework for a fitness trainer because she was seeking my help to come up with a CAV framework. How can she showcase her services? I helped her with the CAV framework to show her services or showcase her services. So in the case of job interview, you can always bring your CAV framework. In the case of salary negotiation that goes along with the job interview, you have to know that if you have got to a stage where you are now discussing salary, you have already passed a huge process of the interviews. You are now among the select few who are being selected or chosen for a discussion on salary. You should already feel better if you have got to the stage of salary negotiation. But again, in the case of salary negotiation, you have to think about the interests of the other party and what do you bring to the table. If it's a salary negotiation where you might have to deal with maybe a little bit of lesser pay component in basic, but you get more of stocks or things like that, all those have to be looked at in the situation. So it's scenario to scenario dependent. But at the same time, it is very important on what your mindset is in that salary negotiation, because like I mentioned earlier, if you don't have stronger alternative, let's say this is the only job and you don't have any other job, you might be a little bit more desperate, not to the extent, but a little bit more committed to making that decision and going for whatever salary you get. Otherwise, if you have been offered maybe 2 or 3 places and now you have a stronger or a more confident means of negotiating, that's where you can bring more value to yourself in the salary negotiation.
Does this answer your question, Pratap?
Yes, sir, certainly, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Next question from GS Viswanath. In fact, this is my question also. I was waiting before
Okay.
that Vishwanath has fired it up. See, basically, as I'll explain, for Indian tradition, culture,
Right.
so we always been told that we have to be submissive to elders. So we have to listen to elders, whatever they say, not to question back, right? I don't know about your generation, but our generation, definitely, we always been told that we have to be submissive to elders. So we are saying negotiation skills for kids. Will this not come out as being brash when you try to negotiate with the elders, seniors, but kids more? I think that's what his question also.
Okay, let me give you an
Or
example. Maybe
kids are
that'll help
in
you.
the teen, kids are in the teen trying to negotiate, would it come out as being harsh, brash?
Okay, the first point I will
Jagan,
highlight or use.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking I'm still a kid, Jagan. So
So you don't want to come out as brash, is it, Mr. Vishwanath?
yeah, I mean, I'm just telling this happens, especially when you meet
Yeah.
in AABN. We have a tradition. We have people like Mr. Sitaraman who are 70s, and then
Right.
you always show deference when you meet them. You know, you don't
Mhm.
negotiate. You keep you just, if they say jump, you just ask how high, nothing else.
Yeah, especially
Okay.
kids, definitely if they ask, senior parents or relatives, elders, they think that they shouldn't be questioning back. That's the expectation, especially in Indian culture. Right?
So this is what I would say. When I teach negotiation to kids and young adults, it is not very different from what I'm teaching adults. And that is the fact that you are negotiating with the parent doesn't mean you negotiate emotionally, or doesn't mean that you have to demand things that are out of proportion. What I teach kids and young adults is to follow the same interest-based approach. And when I say interest-based approach, meaning when you are negotiating, talk to the parents and understand what their interests are. So at the end of the day, it is meant to be a win-win for not only the kids and young adults, but also for the parents. I'll give you an example. A high school student, he had a very keen interest on photography, right? Now, of course, as you know, most Indian parents want the kid to either go and do engineering, or I'm sure engineering is close to all of you, but also at the same time, maybe medical or accounting or something like that, or something that will help them. What happens is the photography might not be an area which the parents will easily agree in terms of an area where the child wants to go and learn more about. So if this is a scenario, what options does the child have, or the high school student have? They have a few different ways that they can influence their parents. First of all, they could use a technique where they bring the benefit to the other party, or that's the parents, and say that, and match their, or be able to comply with their interests. So even if I have to join an engineering course, I will work hard towards it, but at the same time you have to let me do the photography at my own time. So maybe as an additional course, I do want to take photography, right? That's one option. Second option is you bring in some vividness. I explained to you, vividness is an extraordinary way of presenting some information. This is actually a real life case. So I'm highlighting to you that what the student did is he took a couple of big well-known magazines, and he put his photograph on the magazine cover. So he superimposed his photograph on that and said, look how does the cover look, and based on that, it indeed looked really good because it was on that magazine cover, and it looked really good. He was able to extraordinarily present his viewpoint. Again, these are some of the techniques that he could use. The authority, meaning he could say, take this situation to a grandparent and get grandparent to agree, right? And then maybe the parents agree. So these are all the different ways of using techniques. Again, my highlight to all the kids, or in this case to us who are negotiating with older people, like if I'm negotiating with my parents, is again, understand their interests. They always have a reason why they are saying something to you. If you understand the reasons, that's the best way that you can come up with a creative solution that might work for both. Hopefully that answers the question. Again, it's dependent situation to situation.
Vishwanath, is it answering your question?
I mean, we have to learn. See, it's and this is the way we have been brought up, from childhood.
Right.
So, it's refreshing to listen to Anuj. I'm listening with lot, because I think as we integrate globally, I think we'll have to teach our kids how to do that. Yes, I think.
Yeah, I think for many of us, it is probably a matter of unlearning and relearning, because a lot of these concepts don't apply in a situation that we have been brought up or known to deal with in in the whole career. So in many cases, it is also a matter of unlearning and then relearning.
Especially for me, I got a 26-year-old daughter to be married off, so I'm learning several things actually about negotiation.
Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, at least my perspective is we can be, I understand where you're coming from, Vishwanath, because we all been facing that. But at least we can be, whatever the interest, whatever Anuj said, that we can keep those in mind so that the negotiations could be better as elders or when we are dealing with youngsters. That's it. The next question, Anuj, is actually very simple and maybe pleasing to your ears also. Yuvarajan, how to get these books?
Okay, I think you have my contacts that I had shared earlier. If you want a signed copy, you can reach out to me separately. Otherwise, the books are on Amazon.in, so you can order them on Amazon.in. Both books are available there. But if you would like to get a signed copy, you can, of course, reach out to me separately and we can discuss that.
Okay. Arun Kumar, what techniques to be used when trying to negotiate through an unorganized market in any segment? In India, unorganized market is much higher than organized market. Arun, do you mean unorganized market is in terms of street vendors or unregistered companies, individuals, etc., right?
True, so more of freelance. I mentioned about so specific. So we like, it be very specific. I represent an air conditioning industry, and and we see this. We see in air conditioning, it is 85% is, they say, is an unorganized. When I say freelance technicians, doing the service, or in fact, spare parts are come through mostly for an unorganized sector where people are getting to directly importing and doing it. So how do we penetrate? There's a huge market share. And what type of techniques can we use to make some market share move towards us is what my question to Mr. Anuj.
Individual professionals, Anuj.
Right. So I think the techniques that can help in this case is first of all, the commitment technique that I mentioned to you is get some kind of a commitment or promise from the other party. Not exactly a promise. What I mean here is get them to be committed to you in terms of providing service by offering them maybe a longer term contract, or again, not a contract, but at least a longer term verbal association, building that longer term association with them. That's one way to deal with organized markets. Of course, what I'm mentioning here is, I'm sure you all have tried this, but I'm just trying to put a name to that technique. The other is using references. Like I mentioned earlier, your network is the most important when you come to any kind of service that you need. So if you have a network where you have built solid relationships with other people, you will obviously get to a situation where one of your network people is able to help you out in terms of this unorganized market also. So there could be a few other techniques that apply, like reciprocation can apply. If you do something for the person, I know somebody who actually he's a pilot. What he does is he's able to help bank professionals during his flying, maybe to send some information or deliver some information to the other side as a part of his flying. But when he does that, what he's also building is a relationship, a reciprocation relationship with the bank officers. And it might not be related to any specific situation, but building that relationship and that reciprocation helps when you actually have a situation where you need to deal with that bank officer and you need some help. So these are a few other techniques: reciprocation, commitment, and references that can be used. of course, if they see more value in what you are doing than some of the other parties that they are working with, if they see more value, if they see it in an extraordinary manner, the vividness techniques also come in. So what I'm trying to highlight is many of these techniques can be applied. You have to pick 2 or 3 techniques that apply the best in that situation. And if you have a certain situation, I can talk to you offline also.
Got that, Anuj. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, that solved the questions I could see in the chat window. If I have missed anything, Tariq or anyone here has put any questions.
Yeah,
I think
anyone would like to unmute and ask directly also, you are welcome. I think we are almost done.
I see hand raised.
Yeah,
I think it's Haripriya. Go ahead, Haripriya. You can unmute.
Hello. Yes. Thanks, Anuj. It was power-packed presentation. People were asking a lot of questions, mostly technical. This is connected with emotional negotiation or whatever it is. How does ego play a role in negotiation?
Ego actually depends. I mean, if you're talking about ego on either side of the table, it plays a huge role and has a huge impact on the negotiation. As you can probably understand already, is when you see somebody who has a higher ego, the first point that does is your trust and credibility for that person is reduced. So what that means is, when you're dealing with somebody who has a higher ego, you will either apply a technique called authority, for example, meaning you will either bring in somebody who is at a higher authority who will be able to deal with a high ego person, or you will deal with only the matter that is being discussed, the problem or the situation that is being discussed, and you will not build a longer term relationship. Maybe you will even avoid negotiating with that person in future, because ego is never a good case for anybody to build longer term relationships. So what we have to remember is we have to keep our ego out, because like I said, it's not giving good vibes to the other party. Second is, it's not going to encourage them to come back to you. So you'll not build that longer term relationship. Third is, ego actually has a very high impact in terms of maybe a walk away, in the sense that you make a small mistake, demonstrate ego, the other party might walk away, because not everybody can deal with the ego. Some people just don't want it, right? Don't want to deal with it. So they walk away. So there are all these different components that come in when you're dealing with ego. And that's why I think it is very important to try and assess the situation from a very practical and collaborative side of the mind, and keep the ego aside. Even if we have, some people have ego because they have the authority, or they have the maybe a power. They're a party of power. In that case, like I said, if we deal with that party, we might either bring in another authority of power so to match that ego, or in many cases we just don't deal with it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So in that case, if you can't get back to center during your negotiation, is it okay to take a break from negotiation? How do you answer that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if it is a situation where you are engaging and the egos are clashing at that stage, where during that engagement, you of course have to take a timeout. You have to take a break. At that moment, just say, I'm sorry, let's probably reschedule this and come back to it. Take that out of that meeting, take it out, discuss with other people, come back with maybe some solutions that will address the ego first, in the sense that remove that ego component first and then go into negotiation. So like many people have said, many professors, and this is very common knowledge, even getting to yes says this, is take the people out of the equation, attend to the problem or attend to the matter, the actual matter. So we always have to be able to take the people out of the equation.
Thank you, Anuj.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Anuj. We have been receiving a lot of positive feedbacks and appreciation for your
Thank you so much.
lecture today, and most likely we'll also engage you for a proper training session sometime. If people are interested, we can form a group and engage on a longer training session in the days to come.
Absolutely. That training session, that workshop that I'm talking about, it can be done in 3 different ways. One is an influencing techniques session that I mentioned. It could just be for influencing techniques, and I'll share a lot of examples, and maybe we'll do some activity on influencing. The second could be a high, like a 1.5 to 2 hour session. And the third, of course, is the long 6 to 8 hours workshop with the role play and all that. So there are all the different ways of doing that.
Excellent. Excellent. We look forward to such sessions.
Thank you. Thank
So
you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for that outstanding session, Anuj.
Thank you so much.
Yes, your perspective was very refreshing. Well, we see very few people can express their passion for the subject and profession so effectively.
Thank you so
You are
much.
one of them. Thank you, Anuj. Thanks for joining us.
Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.